Now, when you factor in all the angles related to the Snow White budget by the Walt Disney Company and why it's such a colossal failure, everything such as the press tour, the marketing campaign, the set designs, the CGI, Rachel Zegler's travel expenses for singing overseas when it came to different countries besides the United States, this really is an overspending spree by Disney CEO Bob Iger, and nobody has anybody else to blame but Bob Iger himself. Everyone should blame Bob Iger. It's all his fault when it comes to the budget, the metrics involved in this budget for Snow White. If you really add it all together, it is well over $300 million lost for the Disney company. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So Bob Iger is hopping on the damage control train yet again and doubling down on his agenda, his ideology, and getting very defensive toward the critics, the criticism, the backlash, and everything else going on with Snow White, Rachel Zegler, Gal Gadot, etc., etc. And Bob Iger seemingly is just getting very much bitter over the fact that this is going to be his legacy. Snow White, as a failure, will be his legacy that he will leave behind in 2026. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, he does plan to step down by sometime next year. Most likely with a CEO that will either be as bad as Bob Iger, if not worse. We'll have to wait and see. But overall, what's really intriguing here has a lot more to do with Bob Iger and how he's defending this movie at all costs like no tomorrow. And exactly why he's going to damage control, well, it's all about protecting his legacy, right? It's all about really just sharing reassurance to the shareholders, to the customers, just telling them it's all going to be okay with this movie. It's the #1 movie in the world, blah, 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 blah. Let's get into this. So, with the Walt Disney Company in panic mode over the Snow White box office metrics and the ongoing terrible reviews from critics, even from critics that they once trusted, one major development now involves more to do with Disney CEO Bob Iger heading into yet another round of damage control, revolving around Snow White and the Zegler backlash. Iger delivered the following toward the critics and to the growing backlash surrounding the film. As CEO, I find it is my responsibility to address any criticism regarding our films and/or television programs. What we are witnessing right now is a historic event that I feel illustrates everything wrong in our country today. The noise that we here at the Disney Company are dealing with have been, of course, putting up with, I think we have to admit now, is coming from a political landscape toward a film that contributes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It couldn't be more obvious that what we are dealing with in regards to the critics and the criticisms surrounding our remake that we put so much effort and work into is just blown out of proportion and unnecessary for our cast and crew to be dealing with at this time. People like to use the words woke and ideology when they really have no idea what those words even mean to begin with. As CEO, I urge everyone who is a fan of Snow White or who wants to become a fan of this iconic Disney character to give this product a chance in the theaters to speak for itself. What we produced is by far one of our most successful Disney musicals yet, and illustrates itself as a reimagining of Snow White, something that was necessary for us to do here at the Disney Company by redesigning Snow White and changing the meaning of her name and background was also another necessary measure to fit with the times. If you are against our take and our direction for this character that's been around for decades, then I think this also spells that improvements need to be applied to people's values and priorities when it comes to film and the movies they see today in the theater. Now guys, before I move on, let me just say one thing about Bob Iger. He's obviously getting very angry and bitter over the fact that he's being called out endlessly, not just by critics, but by the mainstream media. Shocker, right? That Bob Iger is the one that contributed to this disaster, and it's true. He is the one that called the shots in the early stages to really just invest well over $300 million for this movie. You know, between the press tour, the marketing campaign, everything else related to, you know, promoting this film, it was all unnecessary because it added on to the standard budget of the film. You had 3 rounds of reshoots that also added on to the budget of this movie, you know, tacking it up way above $300 million. And look, when you look at the opening weekend, sure, in isolation, one would say, oh, that's not too bad, 80-something million dollars. Well, when you look at the budget of how much money they put into this thing, this is a bust. This is a failure for Disney, and it's not going to turn around for them in the least. We'll have a lot more to talk about this in the coming days. But Bob Iger here, yet again, is doubling down on how the critics are wrong and Disney is right, and how Disney is not about any kind of an ideology or woke agenda or anything like that. And obviously he's lying. This is why I like to call him Bob Iger. He will say whatever he has to say to really just string along the shareholders, string along the core customer base that values Disney, to just get them to go ahead and see their film and to invest in Disney for the years to come. That's really what it all boils down to, and why Bob Iger is going to continue to say such nonsense. Continuing on, he goes on to double down further. Miss Zegler is someone I refuse to comment on at this time, but as for our film, it is the #1 movie in the world right now, no matter what way you want to look at it. I also have no comment on the metrics that we invested in for our budget, and those comments will be made at a later time. We ask everyone to let this film speak for itself, and for anyone to not listen to the noise and behavior coming from obvious opinionated individuals that do not support the Disney brand. As CEO and someone who also values the character Snow White, I will not stand for any criticism toward a character's design and how we shifted away from the source material. This has nothing to do with any kind of an ideology, but rather it all had to do with creative measures on our end to create a new story for this iconic Disney character. Again, Bob Iger saying how they shifted away from source material, and if you don't like that, well then, that's on you. That's basically his attitude, right? So, in regards to what he was talking about, how they shifted away from source material, two major things. Two drastic things. The prince is no more in this movie. There's no prince, alright? You have a character called Jonathan. He is a bandit, a thief, an outlaw. You know, whatever you want to say, that's basically what he is in this movie. And you also have the name of Snow White, which, by the way, she was called that by her mother and father for surviving a blizzard. Alright, not for the design or appearance of the character, she actually is called that because she survived a blizzard. So that's how out of whack Disney truly is, to change source material, and for critics to call that out, to also be labeled as haters or just, you know, illogical critics out there that make no sense by Bob Iger. That just goes to show you how truly out of touch with reality many of these CEOs like Bob Iger truly are in the Hollywood sphere, in the Hollywood bubble that truly popped within the past couple of months, and why you have a lot of these studios beginning to slowly turn the tide, right? Beginning to actually reach for common sense, because they know their business models are dead, but Disney is the one, you know, petty studio. It's the one stubborn studio that wants to keep doubling down on DEI and all of that nonsense that comes along with it. But overall, I would like to hear what everyone has to say about the Snow White backlash and everything surrounding this film, everything to do with Bob Iger, Rachel Zegler, the Gal Gadot drama with Rachel Zegler, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.